Welcome to the discussion segment of Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV. Development Focus. Majid is the one that didn't allow me to know what I was saying, because if you know, it says it's a regular one AIT, so I nearly want to say welcome to AIT. But nevertheless, AIT ITV is one Nigeria, and we are one in solidarity. It's 62nd anniversary of Nigerians' independence. The celebration took off on Saturday. Before then, we have religious services in mosque and church. And then on the morning of Saturday, the president addressed the nation. And later, there was a commemorative event at the Eagle Square here in Abuja. And several other town hall meetings have been organized by media and civil society. Editorials have been written, opinions have been written on where we are in Nigeria and way forward. Today we want to look at Nigeria at 62, successes, challenges, and prospects. And I brought a how do I describe him? He's a man of many colors, but primarily he's a writer, he's a columnist, he's a journalist, he's an analyst, all roles. He's a communication expert. I'm talking of Malam Majid Dahiru. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for honoring our call. I know you have a very busy schedule, but I appreciate your being on this. So let's look at Nigeria. 62. I want us to look at three different parts. I don't want us to start with lamentation.
Okay.
So what will you, in your own estimation, consider as the successes we've recorded in the last 3 scores and 2, in the last 62 years of nationhood? Is there anything actually that we can regard as a success story of Nigeria?
I have to think very hard.
You have to think,
yes.
Because I know it's very easy to look at the challenges, yes, and what hasn't worked.
Successes, it's difficult because you have to measure success with a benchmark against other countries or nations of the world, because we're not living in isolation. So, successes depends on the context within the contemporary times of what actually means success. So if you do that kind of benchmarking, you would understand why it's a bit difficult for me to begin to point out success stories for Nigeria.
Okay.
After 62 years. Except of course that, Nigeria is still intact.
Exactly.
The way it was created, even though it seems to be falling apart 62 years later.
It's like a vehicle that is having a very shaky wheel.
Is it shaky?
So it's more than shaky.
It's more than shaky. But otherwise, the only success story that we can point at is the fact that, somehow we've managed to remain as one, and that is why we're able to celebrate 62 years of independence.
Okay.
Between 1960 and 2022. So that to me is about the only success we can point at, honestly speaking.
But what about advancements we've made? Some will also point out that infrastructure-wise, there have been significant improvement. It's not the number of schools you have at independence that you have now. It's not the number of hospitals you have. It's not the number of roads. It's not the number of vehicles. You have very beautiful bridges, infrastructure that has happened. And then largely Nigerians that are doing well in diaspora is part of our success story. Today I read about Governor Abiodun giving Tobi Amusan a house and 5 million naira. Glo has made her ambassador You know, everybody is identified with that. And several other Nigerians doing well in diaspora. Those are our exports. Those are our ambassadors, and that should count as part of our success.
Okay, a country like Somalia, for example, that is all but collapsed. Somalia has a very thriving and robust diaspora. In fact, a major source of foreign exchange for Somalia is diaspora remittances from America and United Kingdom. But that in itself is not a success story for Somalia as a country. Because Somalians left their country because it was not conducive for them to ply their trade, to live a decent life, and had to take economic refuge in saner climes in North America and Western Europe. But the majority money is back home because the average is back home. But that in itself is not a success story. These are individual successes that the state, the Somalian state, for example, had nothing to do with. In fact, it was forced upon them. A lot of people wouldn't have wanted to live outside the domain of their original countries, but they were forced into economic exile because of the collapse of the Somalian state, beginning from the late 80s. It's almost the same thing with Nigeria. How come we don't have a large American diaspora community in China or in Africa, or even in Nigeria? How come we don't have a large Arab diaspora community from Saudi Arabia or the Emirates in America, in Nigeria, or in other parts of the world? Because their home countries provide enough opportunities for them to live a decent life in security, with their welfare incrementally improving with time. So if you benchmark this against Nigeria's situation, you discover that we have a thriving diaspora. It's in itself not a success story for the Nigerian state, but for the individual Nigerians. How come this diaspora are not at home? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people moving from part of the country to the other to earn a living. No, there's nothing wrong with it, but when it becomes a forced decision because the home front can no longer provide you with security and welfare, to the point that you see a mass migration out of Nigeria on its 62nd anniversary. It has not been this high. The level of movement out of Nigeria to Western Europe.
You mean the Japa phenomenon?
I think it is much more than what we saw in the 80s.
Yeah, when Andrews went checking out.
It's like anybody, if you have a neighbor you've not seen for some time, the next time you call him, he will respond to you through WhatsApp and tell you, sorry, I'm no longer in Nigeria. I'm now in Canada, in the UK, in the US, Ireland, and so on. You and
I were at a town hall meeting 2 days ago, yes. The Luxterra Foundation, Leadership Foundation town hall meeting on Nigeria till 62. And there was an intervention by a medical doctor.
Yes.
And he did say that at the rate which Nigerians are immigrating, particularly medical doctors, he gave statistics of those who have left for UK, Saudi Arabia, and the rest. And he said, in next to no time, we will only have native doctors taking care.
No, the trend continues. It must sound like a joke, but it's a reality that might just.
So we have to queue to get
back to our ancestral method of healthcare.
To herbalist to say, Baba, I'm number 35.
Exactly, to get herbs, herbal remedy.
But actually Chinese,
yes.
They live on herbal remedies.
So can live on Chinese.
Acupuncture and herbal remedies. So again, it's a very sad story, but
I'm trying to be optimistic. I can feel your optimism because you are a patriot. I know you feel like
we have no other country.
What can we talk about that is positive? But
yes, because I'm struggling. Even me.
So maybe you can help me out. If there's anything positive, please
but there will also. I mean, you have nailed it on the head. We have we are not Czechoslovakia, we are not USSR, we are not
Exactly.
we are not Yugoslavia.
Yes.
So we still.
If we don't take stock of why we are where we are today, we might just be heading towards some of those kind of destinations you just mentioned, like Yugoslavia, like Sudan, like Somalia.
Oh, okay. Maybe at this point, since I'm making your work difficult, maybe I should go to the easier one, the challenges. By the way, what's your take on the president's speech? He spoke about 47 paragraph speech, over 20 minutes, which some people said is like stock taking, a scorecard of sorts. What do you make of that president's speech?
If I must be honest with you, I didn't listen to the speech, and I have not actually read it.
Oh, okay.
But
is it out of you don't want to toxify your system?
Because honestly, I do not find the president's speeches inspiring or, would like to say, meaningful to me as a Nigerian. You see, when leaders develop the art and perfect it, for that matter, of reading from prepared scripts that sometimes are detached from reality, you begin to lose the audience. You begin to lose citizens' attention to leadership statements. And in fact, if you agree with me, you will realize that on that same day there was a mass movement across the country, those that call themselves obedient. That mass rally overshadowed the president's speech, so that the media focused more on marches across the country than even analyzing the president's speech. It tells you how much Nigerians have moved away from the monotonous, not so inspiring speeches that has characterized the Buhari administration since it came into power in 2015. And so what we get usually is the routine of chest thumping, positive self-appraisal, insisting that your worst is the best possible for the country, and that you've done your best, buck passing, blaming every other person but yourself, and refusal to take responsibility. And so usually that's what we get. And I'm very sure that the last speech was not so different from it. Otherwise, we would have seen what was different about it and highlighted, but I'm sure it was not so different.
Well, let me know. I've read it and I've analyzed it on a number of platforms. But again, some it's a scorecard for whatever it's worth. Nigerians are counting down. So let's do sectoral analysis of Nigeria at 62. Starting with the politics. How do you think we have fared in 62 years?
Not very well at all. In fact, that is the major problem we have as a country. Last year, when we turned 61, I wrote a piece that I titled Identity Politics as the Bane of Our Democracy and National Development, 61 years after. We need to address some of the fundamental issues that are responsible for the current state of affairs in Nigeria today. Where we can hardly find and point at any success story. And the only thing we can do is to profile solutions. We cannot gloss over the problems and pretend that all is well, because that would be like covering covering smoke with basket in order to conceal a burning fire. Before you know it, the fire will engulf both the basket and you that is holding the basket. So we must look deeper into why we have this situation. And you raised an important point, our politics. Our politics is primarily driven by the sentiments of ethnicity and religion. Such level of identity politics cannot produce the much anticipated dividends of democracy in the form of improved security and welfare. There's no country in the world that has practiced identity politics and that has made any form of progress. And this has been the case since 1960. And you know why? There are vital lessons that our founding fathers did not take from the colonial experience. Very vital lessons. We seem to focus on the politics of colonialism without paying adequate attention to the economics of colonialism and the economic reason for colonialism. You see, the white man in your country from UK sent to Nigeria and imposed it on us for the purpose of political power, control, and exercise. No, that was not the case. It was an economic enterprise on behalf of the home government of the UK. And so, we fail to understand that particular point in time, that every country sometimes needs to survive by engaging externally to show up whatever endowment you have in terms of mineral and human resources. In the case of Nigeria, we were focused inwards. And again, our founding fathers somehow convinced themselves that Nigerians were irreconcilably different in terms of ethnicity and religion, geography of origin, and that we were lumped together by the British in 1914. And so the Nigerian state was unworkable, can never be a united entity. And therefore, at best, to salvage what we thought was an impracticable experiment, they negotiated for a federating unit that was structured along ethnic and religious lines. This was the beginning of the problem. And so, because of this configuration of our federating units along ethno-geographic fault lines, it bet the politics of identity right from 1960. So our politics became who gets what, when, and how on the basis of ethnicity and religion. And so we began to see a phenomenon of ethnic dominance by majorities over minorities. The same thing with religious dominance over minorities by majorities. And all of the internal schism started. And so this also fostered an internal struggle for Nigeria's internally generated resources by the various ethnic groupings and their political leaders as champions. This was primarily what led to the collapse of the French Republic, because there was a conflict between citizenship and indigenship. Nigeria became essentially a country of tribesmen and not a nation of citizens. And I have contended that, look, Nigeria was not supposed to have been structured along such lines. You know why? Whereas we looked at the British, and this is the father lesson we didn't take from colonialism, we looked at the British people as a homogeneous white racial grouping, while we looked at ourselves as heterogeneous because of our differences in ethnicity. Now, what we failed to realize was that, just like us, the white man that came to colonize us also came from different European ethnicities. But because they were monoracial and white, over the years they have been able to submerge their multi-ethnic identities into a super British identity that was primarily monoracial and white. So they looked at the commonalities in first their common race and the fact that, well, all ethnicities in Europe were interrelated. So they began to form national identities. But when they came here, despite the fact that we are monoracial, just like the white people that colonized us, we are monoracial, and it is not true, sir, that before 1914, Nigerians had little or no contact with each other. It is not true. Long before 1914, long before then, the constituent peoples of Nigeria, as it is today, had been interacting through trade, through diplomacy, sometimes warfare, marriages, and all forms of interactions for several millennia before the advent of colonialism. And the evidence of this is in the commonalities of our languages, our culture, our norms, right across the length and breadth of this country.
And that's true. I recall that names will bear, festivals we observe. Almost every tribe has masquerade. You see Igbo masquerades, you see Yoruba, you see the one in Okene. And it's the way the masquerades are similarly dressed. I've not seen a masquerade that is quite different from, apart from the name.
So going forward, sir, we talked about the politics. We must begin to reverse this entrenched narrative that portray Nigerians a monoracial black African entity as people of different and diverse backgrounds that are too diverse and irreconcilably different to be one entity. We must begin to measure in our similarities and begin to minor in those minor differences.
I know, you know, digging deep into identity politics is a whole program on its own. But because this is more like an overview, let's move to economy.
Yes.
You know, in politics, in political science, we talk about substructure and superstructure. What kind of superstructure has economy built on the substructure of politics?
That is even where the impact of identity politics is most felt. You see, the substructure of a modern entity, or let me put it this way, the configuration of a modern nation state in contemporary times must be structured at the sub-level on the economics of production.
Unfortunately so for Nigeria.
It is the politics of distribution and sharing that is at the substructure.
We're not even producing.
Not we're sharing natural resources, rent from natural resources. We can't produce. You know why? All hands are not on deck to produce. You see, what identity politics does to a country is this. It leaves you divided. There's no common purpose. Each group comes in to take from what is available to the sections of the country with them as the champions, as the major beneficiaries. And so, rather than Nigerians coming together as a Nigerian entity to compete with Ghana, South Africa, China, Europe and America for global race for resources. What you see is that Nigerians are divided along ethnic lines in the internal struggle for who controls what you call the national cake, which is majorly derived from export of crude oil in its crudest form. It became so bad that we cannot even refine this natural resource. We can't no longer do it. Because when people in charge of refining, they convert it to ethnic fiefdom where they can get and take from the system through corrupt means. And it's not occurred to you that Nigeria, for example, is so intractably corrupt that even agencies that are established to fight corruption become in themselves agents of corruption. You know why? Because everything is configured to take from the system. You see, in a polity that is thriving on identity, like such as Nigeria, corrupt tendencies like nepotism, tribalism, cronyism, favoritism, influence peddling are legitimate cultural tools with which to extract from the center to the various sections of the country. And so you are given a ministerial appointment, you are not there because of Nigerians' interest. You are there because of the ethnicity you belong to. It's your turn to bring back home. So when there's recruitment in your ministry, you can be rest assured that 80% of the recruitment will go to your own community. Guess what? The Federal Character Commission that is supposed to check this anomaly, you know what is usually done? You simply give them their own slots. And they turn the other way. Because you know why? They too are appointed from certain ethnic groups. So they also represent certain interests. So they cannot come here and be checking you and not take something back home. So everything in Nigeria is based on an elaborate patronage system because that is the only reward for identity politics. As against good governance for an economic-driven kind of politics.
Okay, if we look at, we know this is a accumulation of, I mean, let me ask this very pointedly. Is our problem leadership or followership or both?
I think it's a combination of both. However, leadership is more of the problem. Why I say it is both initially is that a leader is usually the product of the society he comes from. But true leadership is one that can transcend above and beyond the current low level of consciousness of the people you seek to lead. So a leader must be visionary. A leader must be one that can think out of the box and look beyond what these other people are saying. And once he begins to lead in the right direction, unite the people, harmonize the preponderance of identity dissonance in Nigeria around the pan-Nigerian identity, where citizenship becomes elevated above ethnicity. And people begin to see the benefit of that. People will begin to surrender their old identities and old ways and embrace the new ones. You know why people somehow cling to the old order? That's the only way they know how to survive. So you need leadership to point at the new direction and lead by example. If you look at countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, South Africa. I don't want to mention the United States and the UK because they are very advanced countries. The countries I just mentioned had an enlightened leadership that realized that first, for any nation to develop on earth, it has to first transform from being a country of tribesmen to a nation of citizens by uniting the people around a common cause.
I think we need to go on a short break to pay some bills, and we'll be back on this. Thanks for staying tuned. We have to pay some bills. I mean, it's not easy to run a TV station without adverts. So, you talked about the rentier states.
Yes.
We are not a productive economy.
No, we can't be. We are not configured to be.
Is that why oil theft is the order of the day?
Oil theft is part of that patronage system we're talking about.
Is that why we cannot add another 1,000 megawatts of electricity
because
in 8 years of Buhari?
Everything runs on patronage. Look, the people we are pointing to pretend over oil exports have their pecuniary interest. And so it is legitimate within the context of Nigeria's rent-seeking economy for someone to compromise, both security agencies, people in the NNPC, community members, everybody compromises at the expense of the state because nobody is loyal to the state. So it is easy.
Okay.
So until you reconfigure Nigeria away from being a country of tribesmen to nations of citizens, you cannot but have the situation you're having today across board, and it will lead to state failure eventually.
Okay, let's look at the education sector very briefly. ASU has been on strike for 8 months now.
Yes.
Did you see this happening under a Buhari that condemned Goodluck Jonathan for keeping students at home for 4 months?
Yes.
And that the money he used to organize the jamboree called National Conference should have been used to sort that out.
Awesome.
Now, you saw what happened yesterday. 2 new unions were licensed. Can I say licensed or certificate? By government. So that just the way they dealt with labor unions when they license TUC, Trade Union Congress, as against the National Labor Congress we used to know. Your assessment, 62 years in of our education, what's your take?
There's a place or a sector that the failure of the Nigerian state is most glaring is in the education sector. It is one place we didn't make improvement. You talked about number of schools. How about the quality of schools? The quality of University of Ibadan in 1956, between 1956 and 1970, for example, is it the same quality today, many years after? The quality of University of Lagos, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Ahmadu Bello University, Azaria, is it the same? It's not the number that matters. It's not the quality. The quantity is the quality. Nigeria's educational sector has steadily degenerated in standards and quality in the last 50 years. Steadily, it has been a steady degeneration. To the point that universities are now being used as consultancy projects by people in government. It comes back to the issue of patronage that I was talking about. So you come to government, the only thing you can do
identity politics.
Just create a university for your village.
Yes.
It doesn't matter the quality, it doesn't matter because over the years we've not been a productive entity. Education now becomes a certification to enable you pilfer from government coffers through paid employment that is not productive, most redundant public service employment. And so government has also gone, has gone into a mode that seems to suggest that, well, universities are not really contributing anything to the economy. And so why do we need to fund education? So why do we need to pay lecturers certain kind of remunerations? Why do we need to commit so much fund to the universities? So government over the years have become used to the fact that we do not need the universities to survive. In fact, they have become important because they are turning out more graduates that we can employ into the public service. And so government does not see the need to do that which ASU is demanding. And what ASU demanding? Revitalization of universities. The state of our Nigerian universities, as a Nigerian, are you happy with the state of affairs in the Nigerian university? Is anybody happy with that? Now, all over the world, sir, education is a fundamental human right because it's a matter of national security. The entire economy of the US is dependent on the university system. The entire national security apparatus of the US, including its military industrial complex, is dependent on the output from its university system. That's why the government of the US not only retains federally funded universities, federal, mostly specialized universities, state governments of the US and other territorial entities also fund publicly owned universities. And the federal government also helps to subsidize universities at the state level. Not only that, even the private universities in America like Harvard, like Yale, like Stanford University, Chicago State University, and all of that are actually funded substantially by the federal government of the United States of America. In 2018, about 75% of the research grants received by the university came from the federal government of the United States of America for private universities. That is the importance of education, because you know why? America knows that it's an investment in their economy. It's an investment in human resources. Let me take you down memory lane. In 1939, the Second World War broke out, and America found itself on the other side opposing Germany, alongside France, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. Germany started a project to develop nuclear weapons ahead of America. But unfortunately for Germany, because they were purging the German nation of its Jewish population. So Albert Einstein and another group of Jewish professors wrote a letter to the American president that Germany is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon and that America would do better to develop theirs ahead of Germany. Otherwise, the balance of terror in that war would tilt in favor of Germany. It was academics that the Manhattan Project assembled, academic professors, university professors, that were assembled together and funded by the federal government of the United States to help the American nation develop nuclear weapon, the first in the world that put America ahead as the global superpower. It was a product of the universities. How about Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley today is the home to some of the largest tech companies in the world. From your Yahoo to your Google to your YouTube to your Facebook, name it. Multi-billion, not multi-trillion dollar entities. How did Silicon Valley incubate such innovations? It was a collaboration between Stanford University and a NASA space station around the area where we know today as Silicon Valley. It was the research collaboration between these two entities that actually gave rise to Silicon Valley. Education. So these countries understand that an investment in education is an investment in the economy and national security. But in the case of Nigeria, it is not so. We see investment in education as charity to simply get some people educated and get certificated and begin to look for jobs. Because we did not prime even the university system to be productive, to be able to contribute to industry-relevant knowledges as output. And so what ASU is asking for is to return universities to what it's supposed to be. And I'm saying, fund researches, fund the revitalization of institutions to provide decent libraries, laboratories, and a conducive learning environment where students can also have decent dormitories. Because all of these components are necessary to help incubate the right sort of thinking in our human resources to boost the economy. and what is ASU asking for? 1.3 trillion, right?
1.2 actually.
That is less than $2 billion. The budget for an average American university executive budget is in excess of $15 billion per annum.
So let's wind down. What is the way for the prospects? Where is the low-hanging fruit that can redeem Nigeria? At the town hall meeting on Wednesday, Father Eusoni said he has his center, which you are also involved, Luxterra Leadership Foundation has put together report of different conferences and reforms.
In some of those,
you've summarized that.
Yes.
And he was talking of restructuring, rule of law, and then the issue around regionalization. But your own, in two minutes, your own solution, prospects for Nigeria going out of this old morass.
We need a deliberately inclusive political process that will be backed by a purposeful administrative procedure that will seek to transform Nigerians from tribesmen to citizens through the replacement of state of origin with state of residence, for starters. So we need a deliberate political process. 2023 provides that opportunity. We must now look at electing a pan-Nigerian individual that is thoroughly, true and true detribalized, who has internalized the philosophy of the oneness of the Nigerian people, and who understands that he needs to undertake a fundamental reconfiguration of the Nigerian state towards a more socially cohesive and united entity that can compete globally. Because you need leadership to actually kickstart this process. As citizens, we cannot do what we are doing now, bringing out these ideas, trying to push a new line of thinking along this direction. But you need a political leadership to give it life. We need for Nigeria what the Turkish people had in Kemal Atatürk, Mustafa Atatürk. We need in Nigeria going forward what the Saudis had in Abdulaziz bin Saud, what the Americans had in George Washington, and what all other countries had in
Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore,
Otto von Bismarck of Germany. We need such leadership. We need Mao Zedong of China in Nigeria. We need a leader that can begin the process of recreating the Nigerian state. Statecraft, nation building must go hand in hand with national development. Otherwise, no policy, no form of restructuring will solve this problem. So we need to focus on the political process and the political parties. For a very long time, sir, we have abandoned the responsibility of political parties, because political parties are supposed to be the brain boxes of a democracy. Because you need the human touch. I
agree with you, Majid, 100%. And time is not just a friend. I wish I could keep you here for much longer. Nigeria 62 is not something you discuss in 40 minutes. But I want to appreciate you very immensely. We have another segment coming up. Otherwise, I would have just loved us to continue, because there are several other sectors of the Nigerian society we've not been able to talk. But you have alluded to quite a number. Leadership change. 2023 will be very epochal for us. Either a make or a ma.
Social cohesion and national unity should be the national agenda before all of the aspirants.
Thank you very much, Majid Dairu, a communication expert, newspaper columnist, analyst, and a patriot to the core. Thank you for obliging us with your presence. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the socio-political economy, socio-political inclusion of persons with disability in politics and governance of Nigeria. Stay tuned.